Hello, my loves. Welcome to the Wild Women series. Today, the story that I have for you from the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estés. It's called The Red Shoes. I think this is one of the most haunting and symbolic stories from this book, from the chapters that I've read till now. And it's a tale that speaks directly to the part of us that has felt lost, disconnected, spiritually starved, or pulled away from our joy, often by forces that we didn't even recognize. So this story is called The Red Shoes, but it's not literally about the shoes. It's not about the literal shoes as such, but it's about a woman's soul, her instinct, her creativity, her hunger for life, and what happens when this hunger is denied, manipulated, or stolen. It's a story of every woman who once felt alive, wild, and joyful, but through life's turns, she was seduced, silenced, or exiled from her true self. Let me read the story first for you in my own words. There once was a little girl. She was orphaned, poor, and had no shoes. But she was wild, resourceful, and soulful. She gathered scraps of cloth and made her own red shoes, stitching them by hand. They weren't perfect, but they were hers. They gave her joy, they made her feel alive. But soon a gilded carriage rolled into her life, and there was an old woman inside it. The old woman took her in, promised comfort, promised a better life, but the price? She had to give up her red shoes. They were burned to ashes. Now she lived in a house of silence and control. She had to dress properly, behave quietly, and follow all the rules. No yearning, no dreaming, no wild joy. One day, the old woman took her to church, and in a moment of temptation, the girl was lured into a shop where a sly shoemaker offered her shiny new red shoes. They weren't made by her hands, but she wanted them anyway. She got attracted because she remembered her own red shoes. She wore them to church and was judged and shamed by everyone around her because it was not appropriate, it was not accepted by the society to wear a color like red to the church. Still, the shoes had their grip. Then came a soldier, one day, a gatekeeper, who knelt down and touched her shoes. In that moment, something awakened in her. The shoes began to move, and they wouldn't stop. They danced and danced, and she couldn't take them off. They led her far from home, far from soul, far from everything she once knew. She tried to take the shoes off, but they clung to her feet. She tried to stop the dance, but the shoes had taken control. Eventually, exhausted and broken, she was forced to make a harrowing choice. She went to the executioner and begged him to cut off her feet just so she could be free. And he did. And even then, the shoes, with her feet still inside, kept dancing without her. Now that we've heard the story, let's understand what it means for us. What is the symbolism of this story? So, if you are watching this video for the first time, a video like this from this series, this is what I'm doing. I'm reading these different chapters from this beautiful book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And in each chapter, there is a story, and then there is symbolism to connect it to our own lives to help us heal our own wild feminine. So, the story part is over. So that's why now I'm moving to the symbolism part of it. Now, as you could see that this was not a fairy tale, it was not a story to entertain us, but actually it's kind of a soul map. It's a soul map because it's showing us what happens to a woman who once knew her instinct, her creativity, her wildness, her joy, what happens to her when she begins to lose the touch with her own soul. So in the story, Dr. Clarissa has explained this disconnection that happens to us when we lose touch with our own soul. It happens through 8 different traps, and I'm going to discuss these traps one by one. So the trap number 1 was gilded carriage that came into her life, that old woman who came in the carriage to adopt her. So this is basically you're leaving behind what was handmade. So this trap usually is very shiny, but what it does is it pushes us to abandon what's raw in us, what's real, what's ours, in exchange of something that is polished, that is socially acceptable, or probably something that is easier for you to do. So little girl had her own little shoes that she had made. They were crude, but it was hers. And it was something that made her so happy. She was full of life when she wore them for the first time. And then came the gilded carriage in her life, the promise of ease, the promise of belonging, the promise of comfort. So, in a woman's life, a gilded carriage can be a job that we take for security purposes, a marriage that we get into for stability, and maybe the silence that we choose to embrace to avoid being too much for others. This kind of gilded carriage makes our life really easier. It seems very shiny and attractive. It makes our life somehow easier on papers, but it actually leads to soul abandonment. The price is soul abandonment. So the trap number two, as per the story, was the old woman, the process of domestication. So from the story, the old woman represents this rigid system that we are part of, that makes us conform, that asks us to behave, to stay quiet. It's also the collective voice around us that says, don't be wild, stay quiet, be nice, tone it down. And soon, when we become part of such a system, we are no longer choosing our own life. We are being shaped by someone else's expectations. And soon our creativity dies and the soul starts to starve. Now, trap number three is burning the treasure, your treasure, which initiates the loss of soul joy. So in the story, the handmade red shoes that represented her joy, her creativity, her connection to her instinct were burnt. So this is what happens when we silence our art, our dance, basically our hunger for something more. And when we pretend that it doesn't matter, these things are anyways like not productive. It's not needed. And the cost is that you become numb, you become dry, quietly despairing. And even if you're functioning on the outside, in this trap, your inner spirit is gasping for air. Trap number four is instinct injury, which is the death of inner knowing. So when we live long enough cut off from our truth, our instinct, this inner knowing, it starts to die. You can no longer feel when something is wrong. You stay when you should run. You comply when you should say no. This is the state so many women find themselves in. They're not broken, but just disconnected, numb, and doubting everything what once was obvious to them. Trap number five is sneaking a secret life. So when you're cut off from yourself and you're part of a life that you don't like, your wild self, the true self of you, it doesn't just die. She hides and she sneaks out when no one's looking because she craves and then she steals the moment of joy. But eventually it's never enough. So you stay in jobs, in relationships, in friendships, the life that drains you while secretly clutching your red shoe in the dark. And you start to binge on things like you start to binge on maybe TV, Netflix, spirituality, food, on creating chaos in your life. You just binge on something or anything that makes you feel alive. But deep down, every woman who's part of a life like that, she knows that this is not freedom. Now, trap number six is cringing before the collective. So, how the whole church started judging her the moment she entered the church with her red shoes. This happens to us when the external world, the culture, the community, the them that tells you that your wildness is wrong, that your choices are wrong. Then you feel ashamed of your hunger, your boldness, your bigness. And instead of giving them back, instead of roaring them, you shrink, you obey, you conform, and you hide your true voice just to keep the peace. But the cost is unbearable because your silence becomes your soul's burial ground. Trap number seven is faking it, normalizing the abnormal. So this trap comes when you've tried everything but nothing is working. This trap can be explained this way, that it is that point when you've tried everything. You've silenced your soul, you've snuck behind its back, you've shrunk before the world. Then you try to be good and you pretend everything is okay. You normalize the exhaustion, the disconnection, the lack of joy. You tell yourself, I'm fine, it's fine. But you are not. You are running on fumes and your spirit knows it. Trap number eight is dancing out of control, obsession and addiction. So eventually, after trying everything, the hunger becomes extreme, it becomes unbearable. And when the soul-starved woman is finally let loose, for even for a moment, she grabs the red shoes and starts dancing again. By this time, she cannot stop because she is not being led by the instinct here. She is now being led by compulsion. She chases the feeling of aliveness in everything, in addiction, in chaos, in distraction, and it destroys her because it's not the joy of life that kills the soul, it's the lack of it. There were a total of 8 traps in this story that also explain how these traps also play out in our lives. But here's the hope. Even if you've danced yourself in despair, even if your feet are bloodied, even if you've forgotten who you are, there is a way back. A handmade life is still very much possible. Your feet will grow back, your joy will return. Your soul has not given up on you. And the wild woman is still waiting for you at the edge of the woods, whispering, "You're not too far gone, you're not too late. Come home to me." So, what do we do in real life when we have danced too far and when our red shoes have become like a prison? Well, the truth is, we don't return by fixing everything all at once. We return by choosing something small but sacred. We start to slowly get into our handmade life. That life is not perfect, not polished, but it's ours. And that's what healing truly is. It starts when a woman starts to notice again, to care again, and starts to say that this doesn't feel right and I deserve better. And the return to the wild part of us, the wild woman in us, it's not dramatic, it's quiet. It happens when you pick your pen and write again, when you close your eyes and finally rest, when you dare to say no or whisper yes. It happens when you make your shoes yourself piece by piece, stitch by stitch with your own soul thread. And this is how we come back. We come back by saying yes to solitude, silence, and slowness, choosing nourishment over numbing, being fierce about protecting our joy, and refusing to betray ourselves for approval ever again, and staying loyal to our instincts even if it feels inconvenient or unpopular. A woman who's been starved, burnt, and buried, but rises back dancing in her own handmade shoes is the most powerful woman you'll ever witness. Because she has known captivity, she has known madness, but she still chooses to reclaim her life. This is the real story of Red Shoes. Not one of tragedy, but one of awakening, of seeing the traps and saying never again, of reclaiming the wild joy that was always yours. Now I'm going to give you some journaling prompts so you can imbibe the story beautifully. So first question is, you have to ask yourself, what red shoes have I been wearing? Where in my life have I chosen something shiny over soulful? And where do I feel the soul hunger? What parts of my life feel performative, exhausting, and disconnected? And what would my handmade shoes look like today? What brings me more authentic joy, creativity, and freedom? Don't forget to spend some time on these questions. It's going to really help you. If this story mirrors your journey, if you've tasted soul famine, and if you feel that your handmade life has been lost, you're not alone. There's a way back, and there's a home waiting for you that lives within you. There's a woman there, untamed, barefoot, fiercely alive, waiting to take your hand and guide you home. You were never meant to fit into someone else's idea of good life. You were meant to dance freely, wildly, in shoes that fit your soul. Make them again, this time with love, and I'll see you in the next story.